Welcome to Books Without Borders. Today we're going to be reviewing East and West by René Guénon, the first book in René Guénon's critical trilogy on the modern world. In 1924, René Guénon first published East and West, and as we approach the 100th anniversary of its publication, it is beneficial to review this work and remind ourselves of the content and purpose of this work. In comparison to earlier works, East and West explains how society has moved away from the traditional principles upon which it was founded. We read here about how many traditional principles have been inverted to produce an idea of civilization that is based on anti-traditional principles and provides the foundation for pseudo-traditional movements. As a result of Guénon's strong beliefs regarding these anti-traditional principles, the modern human has become estranged from their metaphysical underpinnings and finding it difficult, almost impossible, to reconnect with authentic traditions. The book demonstrates how these anti-traditional principles are incompatible with each individual's potential and stunts the potential of those living in Eurocentric societies. East and West is also the first of Guénon's work that detail his critique of the modern world, with later titles including The Crisis of the Modern World and The Reign of Quantity and The Signs of the Times. However, we're not reviewing those titles today. As Guénon explains in East and West, Western civilization is fundamentally abnormal when compared with traditional civilizations of the East. Guénon suggests ways the West can be reoriented toward the fundamental metaphysical principles it has largely abandoned. He discusses how intellectuality can play a role in this. It is obvious that East and West have changed since Guénon's era. Post-Christian culture's aggressive rationalism and materialism not only corrodes the philosophical and cultural foundations of the West, but has infiltrated Eastern spirituality and metaphysics so thoroughly that it has inspired fundamentalist reactions worldwide and wields power previously unimaginable. We have a West sodden with moral and spiritual degeneration, as well as an East much inflamed with materialism. Nevertheless, there has also been a remarkable degree of interaction between traditional Christianity and Eastern religions. However, this has been marred by an unavoidable tendency towards ill-informed syncretism. Guénon's East and West survives in this milieu with a stunning intellectual punch, read in the context of recent events. However, the East is always the East, and the West is always the West. In a global postmodern culture, we are all more or less forced to consider ourselves as Westerners outwardly. Our only option might be to consider ourselves as Easterners internally. With regard to the preservation of traditional principles, East and West explores the differences that exist between East and West, with particular focus on how such differences affect their chances of restoration. It is discussed in detail how certain aberrant spiritualities in the West can be overcome by referencing the still extant teachings in the East and revitalizing organizations that still retain some of the ideas which were in full bloom in medieval Europe. East and West is divided into two sections: Western illusions and how the differences might be bridged. And these broadly cover the central themes of his work. The author orients the reader by outlining his position on the first page. As indicated by the Kipling quote, "East is East and West is West, and never the twain shall meet." Guénon begins with the notion that the East and West are fundamentally different and challenges it from the viewpoint of spiritual order. He alleges that the perceived gulf is a result of modern, Western notions of civilization. As Guénon points out, civilization, which dates to the Renaissance, is based on a few key premises that give those living in a civilization the power to define and judge others. As Guénon claims, civilization is rooted in the definitions of progress, science, and life. The purpose of this is not to provide a comprehensive analysis of all Guénon's views detailed in the East and West, but to highlight some of the most important and how they relate to his central position. Despite its age, East and West remains an important work. The book is indispensable for those wanting to understand René Guénon's works, as it ties together many of the main themes within them, while also providing a basis for his further critiques of the modern world. This book is essential reading for those seeking to understand the current cultural paradigm, as it explains the elements that have contributed to the shift in epistemic behaviour. This book is a valuable resource for those seeking a paradigm shift to align the modern world with traditional values, as it outlines the causes of the modern world and the remedies for restoring a sustainable society. In light of the significant changes that have occurred since East and West was first published, it is understandable that some of the ideas and terminology presented in it may need to be reassessed. As Guénon presents his readers with immutable principles, the central theme of this work remains relevant today. This book is directed at those who are just beginning to study Guénon's work. You may find this book unnecessary if you've already read a Guénon book. However, it contains ideas, particularly in the first half of the book, better expressed here than elsewhere in his work. As always, René Guénon's beliefs and thoughts remain consistent. It is only after reading about Guénon that one can truly realise that he was a genius. So, what I liked about the book. I found the basic idea to be very interesting. I found the observations about the US and the Far West and Protestantism as a modern religion to be very interesting. Guénon's critique of how focusing on the material can have devastating consequences, and we have to remember Guénon wrote this right before World War II. With everything going on in Ukraine at the moment, I also feel his critique is relevant here too. The not-so-good parts. Like Guénon's other book I read and reviewed, The Crisis of the Modern World, it's quite repetitive and wordy sometimes. It could have been condensed, possibly into something only around 30 pages, maybe even less, and some points could have been clarified better to make it more understandable. I don't think Guénon understands what he's criticising well enough to make the assessments he makes. His take on evolution is straight up weird. If anyone can explain this to me, please leave a comment below. Maybe I'm missing something here. His insistence that science, reason, and Western philosophy have done nothing at all for humanity, while sympathising with his views on rampant consumerism, exploitation of workers, and environmental destruction, quickly becomes a little tiresome. Even though he wrote East and West in 1924, before the most revolutionary discoveries of modernity, such as antibiotics, had happened, he nevertheless asserts that material discoveries, i.e. those in the realm of matter, will always pale in comparison to metaphysical ones. According to him, no amount of scientific research, which he views as a never-ending pursuit of details, will ever improve the human condition in any meaningful way. In some pages, the book is illuminating, particularly when it comes to describing the organisation of the intellectual elite that would restore tradition in the West. Guénon even recommended following the Hindu tradition. I found this quote to be rather interesting, and it made me reflect. The quantitative degeneration of all things is closely linked to that of money, as is shown by the fact that nowadays the worth of an object is ordinarily estimated only in terms of its price, considered simply as a figure, a sum, or a numerical quantity of money. In fact, with most of our contemporaries, every judgment brought to bear on an object is nearly always based exclusively on what it costs. The word estimate has been emphasised because it has in itself a double meaning, qualitative and quantitative. Today, the first meaning has been lost to sight, or what amounts to the same thing. Means have been found to equate it to the second, and thus it comes about that not only is the worth of an object estimated according to its price, but the worth of a man is estimated according to his wealth. René Guénon. It reminds me of another text I read and reviewed called Damaged Life, The Crisis of the Modern Psyche by Todd Sloan. He said, and I quote, "At one end they are put on the conveyor belt. They come off the line at the other end when they are adults. There is no quality inspection. If there was, the majority of these products would have to be stamped damaged goods. Sloan doesn't deny that modernisation has brought many materialistic benefits to us. However, he acknowledges we are yet constantly told how unhappy we are. In this regard, both texts remind me of the famous phrase, "Money can't buy happiness." I will finish with one of my favourite quotes from the book. "The end of a world never is and never can be anything but the end of an illusion." René Guénon. If you've liked this review, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Or why not visit our channel, where you can find a number of reviews across a number of different titles. Thank you for watching.